I think I kind of live by this too. Just do it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arif Rafiq, and welcome to a very special edition of Ask Alice Anything. We're doing this edition to celebrate International Women's Day. I had to ask myself, first of all, I'm not a woman. Second of all, I'm not Alice. So why am I introducing Ask Alice Anything on International Women's Day? I'm not exactly sure. We're going to have to ask Alice that. But regardless, we have four fantastic people here who are going to be sharing a panel, and we're going to be asking some questions of them about women in GIS. I'll let them introduce themselves, but just to go over the names, we have Alice Chin, of course, Alia Kotb, we have Judy Farvolden, and Mingsze Ho. So why don't we start with Mingsze? Introduce yourself, Mingsze. Tell us who you are, and why don't you let us know how long you've been in the industry?
I want to say 7 years. I did a lot of co-ops as well, so it's kind of on and off. I've been a GIS analyst, and now I am a GIS technical solution specialist, and I help people tell stories with maps.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation. My name is Judy Farvolden. I'm the Executive Director of the University of Toronto's Transportation Research Institute and a GIS client.
Hi, you guys have seen me before with Alice on her episodes, Ask Alice Anything. I've been in the industry for about 10 years, various positions, marketing, business development, and right now in an operational role.
My name is Alice, and I've been in the industry since 2006. Sales, marketing mostly, and event planning as well. And the last little while, I've been really focused on doing sales for the Atlantic region of the Canadian market.
So let's get into let's start easy. We'll start with the easy questions, and Mingsze, I'll go back to you. What's your favorite thing about GIS?
My favorite thing, I think it would be just the revealing of patterns through spatial data. Visualize out there, it's very, I don't know, that feeling of, what? That data is showing me this? Like, that kind of feeling is what I like about GIS.
Yeah, I'll build on what Mingsze said. So at the Transportation Research Institute, we do lots of work on people's demand for travel through different modes. And how they move about in the city. And this results in a lot of data from very big simulation models, which is the specialty of people with very special expertise to understand, but very hard for other people to understand. And so just as Mingsze said, when we see these travel demands and the transportation flows over a network using GIS, that tells us stories about people's the way they want to move around in the city and the travel needs that they have. And we've used this data really effectively to show stories about transportation equity and access to mobility and people's special needs for getting around in the city. These are really important issues for us. And we want to be able to share those stories with people who can use that information to make a difference. And that's the power that the GIS stories give to us.
Similar to how Judy described, GIS can be used in transportation. Could it also be applied to other industries?
Yeah, like you look at how GIS would be used, for example, in retail, and not just in retail, in terms of a supply chain or logistics and streamlining a supply chain, but also how retailers would choose their location for their next store or where they put their merchandise and all that kind of stuff. So that's one area. You can use GIS for education, as Judy mentioned, or in Judy's arena. Definitely, and lots of medicine right now as we are experiencing the coronavirus, following that and seeing where the outbreak is, how it's happening, how it's turning into an epidemic kind of thing. That's all GIS, right?
Didn't take long for the coronavirus to enter this conversation.
Everyone's mind right now. But I must say that dashboard is really amazing. It probably has millions of hits daily. And that's the power of GIS, the real-time data. It's that you can see that information at your fingertips as it refreshes, as it happens, and to see on a map, it really gives that relationship that we cannot see if it's just simply on words or even spreadsheets.
A talk, I am going to give a plug here by Steve DeRoy from Firelight, and he leads an Indigenous-owned company that uses GIS mapping to tell Indigenous stories of community, and they use the mapping data in communities across Canada and around the world to capture knowledge about their communities of all kinds, and then they use that knowledge, in their community building as well as in making arguments with other communities about their place on that land. And it's I think a very powerful story about people and their place in land and their use of it.
Do you think the power of GIS could help more young women get involved in this field?
Well, with GIS, I feel like the whole science and math, like being in the STEM field, it's very new to a lot of women, and I noticed that there's a growing trend in women studying STEM now. So that is inspiring, I guess, for people in the field to, people established in the field to set examples for these women. I think that's also very important.
One of the things to work on with young women in this is to understand that maybe some of their interests and their stories have a foundation in data, and to be thinking about the data that tells a story about their interests, their needs, their wants, what's important to them. Because we tend to not maybe to think in terms of data, but this is really a data-driven century. And so all ways of thinking about using the data that's around us for good, I think, are important.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to quickly add, because we're talking about school and people getting into STEM, how I got into GIS was actually really funny, because I was in an environmental program, and the only way I can get a co-op job was doing GIS. Like, I couldn't get other jobs. So I had to learn the software, and it was great because I went into the program thinking I'll be mapping, paper and pen, mapping it out, but it turns out everything went digital. So I learned GIS, and then I found out that the job market has a high demand on, spatial data and data analysis and all these like skill sets that I was learning in school anyways. So I got into it, and that's how I got employed in my co-ops, and now I guess long-term career.
Alice, Alia, Judy, how did you get involved in GIS?
I'm like by education and previous experience, I was in marketing and always with high-tech companies. Prior to getting into GIS, I was more in a more niche market, which is LiDAR. And that you didn't have that many females in there, but I was marketing for a LiDAR company or a manufacturer here in Toronto. And from there, I went into the larger kind of scope of the industry, and I joined GIS. So it's kind of organic, if you will, my move into the industry. Just by coincidence or gaining the experience from other tech companies.
So for mathematics and computer science, but then I didn't really like programming, so I took some database courses. And after I graduated, I knew that I'm more of a people person, so I got into sales for software. So, and I didn't know what GIS is until I looked it up, thinking, oh, this is interesting. And I applied for the position, and I got it. And then when I got it, I started really learning about the application of GIS and the value and how it impacts users. And that got me interested in reading different case studies, and that got me to where I am today.
So as I said, my first degrees were in engineering, and I guess I believed in rational decision making, that if you had enough data and proof and conclusions, then good decisions would be made on it. And then I went to planning school, and I learned that that's just not enough. It's not enough to say that we have the answers. It's not just mathematics that's going to get us it's not just the results of mathematical analysis that are going to be enough to tell us what we should do going forward in terms of like investments in transportation. It happens in policy. It happens because big decisions are made, and those decisions are made on the basis of understanding, and that understanding comes from stories. So we learn like the data is not enough. We have to be able to tell a story. And GIS is one of the most powerful tools we have for telling those stories and hoping that we can make a difference. So we talk about bringing evidence into decision making, and GIS is a layer on top of that tells a story that is our evidence.
Fantastic. All right, last question. Looking at, some of the young women who are entering into their education and trying to decide what to do with their lives, if there was something that you could say to inspire young women to go towards STEM and even go towards GIS, what would that be?
I think I kind of live by this too. Just do it. Just don't ask for permission. Just do it, and then ask for forgiveness later.
So I would encourage young women not to give up on math. Make math one of your superpowers, and to use all those other skills that you have in terms of communications and understanding to bring together the understanding of needs, wants with what you can do about it.
GIS is all about satisfying curiosity. So it's always be curious, right? With that curiosity, you're always going to find something. There's always going to be something new that you'd want to learn. And I think that was one of the things that over my experience in the industry, it's like I was always curious to, although my domain was in marketing, but as Alice said earlier, I was always curious to try out the software, to play around with it. It wasn't a necessity of my job, but always be curious, never stop.
I think in my experience dealing with GIS professionals is that they're so good at making the maps, making the analysis, making their map look good about the data, but then don't forget when you do a data, the key, most important, is also about communication, just like Judy said. So there are a lot of tools to help you communicate what you've built to other people, other departments, other partners. Otherwise, if you just build something and you can't present it or promote it or tell it in a meaningful way that people can engage to, it kind of lose a little bit of its color. So not only you want to make your map very easy to look at, very good to look at, but also you have to sell it. GIS people have to sell their maps, the value of what they do, because GIS is a very new industry, a profession. When you say doctors and lawyers, people know exactly what you do. When you tell your friends, oh, I'm a GIS professional, a lot of people have no idea what that even means because they don't understand the value of it. So it really relies on us, the GIS professionals, to really talk to people in a simple way so they can understand the value, make it relatable to them, so that they understand the importance of your work, and then they can support you, and then they can spread the word for you.
I'm hearing some profound stories from some excellent individuals, from all four of you. Thank you very much. From, and you come from such various backgrounds, coming in from sales, coming in from academia and engineering, coming in from marketing, and sometimes even by accident, right? Many of us fall into our careers by accident. And I think that if there's anything to be said to people who are looking into getting to GIS, you may not even know you're getting into GIS until you're right there. And that's some fantastic stories. So thank you, the four of you, for sharing your stories and how you became GIS professionals. Alice, would you like to wrap up?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank every person, every guest of mine who agreed to be on this video, on this channel, to talk about GIS and your work as a woman in the GIS industry. I think it's wonderful to hear all your stories. And thank you, Arif, for being the most beautiful and eloquent moderator I've ever seen in my life. And for those new to my channel, please check out the other videos that we have on various different topics. Some are more entertainment, some are more for your everyday lives. I just want to bring the topic of GIS so that it can interest you. Everything is somewhere. nothing on this planet you cannot map, which means the extent of this can really get into everything. Think spatial. Spatial thinking should be the foundation of everything. Once you start from there, everything's starting to make sense. The pattern's starting to make sense. The relationship starting to make sense, and you start asking questions you never would thought of in the first place. And that's what I want everybody to remember. So thanks again for being on this channel. Thanks for liking this video, and please comment if you have any questions. Leave in the comment below. And thanks everybody for attending the video. Thanks for coming to me and share with me your stories.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.
Thanks very much.
Alice. Bye.
Happy International Women's Day.
Bye.
Bye.
See you, Internet.
See ya.
Bye, YouTube. I will leave some link below just to explain a little bit about GIS. Please subscribe and please comment if you have any questions for anything. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, and that's a wrap. Bye.